Hello, it's Lilith, and welcome to House of Tales. Today, we will be looking at the story of the white snake. I'm working on a sketch to experiment with border designs and symmetry, because I like square formats quite a bit personally, even though it's not ideal most of the time. I started with pencil, my go-to for confronting a blank picture. Even if most of the details will be washed away later, this will help me work out composition and value so I don't have to think too hard when I move on to ink and color. When that happens, I tend to overwork the drawing. I think with my hands and my lines. Because the drawing is so small, I can't work as precisely as I'd like, but it allows me to complete the sketch in one sitting. If something takes too long, I lose motivation, but I later realized this was because I didn't devote enough time on research and sketching out the concept. Throughout my foundation years at art school, I often cut corners and skipped out on the sketching phases of a project, thinking I can just start on the final and get it done sooner, but of course it never worked out that way. Later on, I loved sketching and researching so much more than the final. My works became more and more fragmented, but I don't mind it myself. I got a little off topic, so let us return to the story. I'm going to share an excerpt from a poem of the same title, The White Snake, written by Anne Sexton from her book titled Transformations. In an old time, there was a king as wise as a dictionary. Each night at supper, a secret dish was brought to him, a secret dish that kept him wise. His servant, who had worn no roses before, thought to lift the lid one night and take a forbidden look. There sat a white snake. The servant thought, why not, and took a bite. It was a furtive weed, oiled and brooding and desirably slim. I have eaten the white snake, not a whisker on it, he cried. Because of the white snake, he heard the animals in all their voices speak. Thus the aura came over him. He was inside. He had walked into a building with no exit. From all sides the animals spoke up like puppets. A cold sweat broke out on his upper lip, for now he was wise. Because he was wise, he found the queen's lost ring diddling around in a duck's belly and was thus rewarded with a horse and a little cash for traveling. On his way, the fish in the weeds were drowning on air, and he plunked them back in, and the fish covered him with promises. On his way, the army ants in the road pleaded for mercy. Step on us not, and he rode around them, and the ants covered him with promises. On his way, the gallows birds asked for food, so he killed his horse to give him lunch. They sucked the blood up like whiskey and covered him with promises. At the next town, the local princess was having a contest, a common way for princesses to marry. 50 men had perished, gargling the sea like soup. Still, the servant was stage-struck. Nail me to the masthead if you will, and make a dance all around me. Put on the gramophone and dance at my ankles. But the princess smiled like warm milk, and merely dropped her ring into the sea. If he could not find it, he would die trapped in the sea machine. The fish, however, remembered and gave him the ring, but the princess, ever woman, said it wasn't enough. She scattered 10 bags of grain in the yard and commanded him to pick them up by daybreak. The aunts remembered and carried them in like mailmen. The princess, ever Eve, said it wasn't enough and sent him out to find the apple of life. He set forth into the forest for 2 years, where the monkeys jabbered those trolls with their wine-colored underbellies. They did not make a pathway for him. The pheasants, those archbishops, avoided him, and the turtles kept their expressive heads inside. He was prepared for death when the gallows birds remembered and dropped that apple on his head. He returned to the princess, saying, "I am but a traveling man, but here is what you hunger for." The apple was as smooth as oilskin, and when she took a bite, it was as sweet and crisp as the moon. Their bodies met over such a dish. His tongue lay in her mouth as delicately as the white snake. They played house, little charmers, exceptionally well. So, of course, they were placed in a box and painted identically blue, and thus passed their days living happily ever after. A kind of coffin, a kind of blue funk, is it not? I should get better at talking about my work too. This is good practice for me. I made the terrible mistake of thinking both my ink pens were waterproof. Because of this blunder, my lines became blotchy and uneven. I don't like putting down ink lines after the watercolor. For some reason, it just doesn't look as nice. Or is that just me? Maybe I just need more practice. I read all of your comments from the first episode, so thank you so much for the support and the feedback. I'm thinking about splitting the series into every other Friday and alternating with drawing tutorials, finally, where I can include more information about specific mediums, so that will be coming next Friday, I think. I also would like to do a sit-down talk-through with Coffee and you. I will be answering some frequently asked questions regarding art school, drawing style, portfolio, etc. So let me know if that sounds like a good idea. After completing the secondary square, I move out from the borders to extend and clarify elements. I made notes here to remind myself of what I liked and disliked from the sketch and what could change. It's sort of like giving myself a crit in my head, but putting it down on paper makes the critique finite. I cut myself off at a certain point because picking on everything I dislike about my drawing for too long makes me blind to what was successful and what did work. I was taught not to become too attached to my work, so I don't box myself into a specific genre, style, or subject. But being a Taurus, I think I'm still a little too habitual. I was looking at 2 different artists for reference. The first is Ivan Bilibin, a Russian illustrator from the 20th century. I love how his drawings are framed and his color is absolutely gorgeous. The second is Katsushika Hokusai, an ukiyo-e painter famous for his print, The Great Wave. I bought a book containing his illustrations of animals, plants, and supernatural beings a few years back. Also, I know I write super small, it's out of convenience. I hate the idea of somebody looking over my shoulder or accidentally seeing my writing, since I write about my feelings a lot, most of the time actually. I've devised quite elaborate formats to prevent people from understanding my handwriting in my journal. And of course, the finishing touches. These supplies are from my mom's scrapbook studio, which is down the hall from my desk. She's had this hobby for over 20 years and has collected lots of materials since then. In addition to washi tape, we have these little stickers we bought from a stationery store in Tokyo, I believe. They're coated with something waxy, and I like the glossy finish. I'm not sure what these are called. I believe they're just called pins. I punctured a hole with a bookbinding needle before inserting them. And now we're done. I had so much fun working on this, and I'll be doing our Sketchbook Sunday this week too. If you like this video, please stick around for we put up new episodes every Friday and Sunday. Happy weekend, and I'll see you soon.